FPL Game Week 38, a free hit draft. If you're playing either your free hit or your wildcard, which effectively works like a free hit this week, we're going to take you through 3 different drafts in this video. We'll have a look at a very safe draft if you're looking protecting rank. We'll have a look at a differential draft if you're completely chasing. And then we'll have a look at a draft which is kind of a combination of the two, which is probably what I'd recommend if you're playing the chip this week. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 2,000 likes is the aim, and subscribe if you are new around here. And if you're on a free hit or you're on a wild card, they basically work the same this week because you're picking a team just for 1 week. As I said in the intro, we've got 3 different drafts depending on whether you want to play it safe, whether you want to chase, or whether you just want to pick what should be a very good free hit draft, which is what we will have a look at right at the end. Just before we dive in and have a look at the different drafts, the first thing to talk about is a couple of things depending on what happens between now and the deadline. The first thing is Alexander Isak is in these drafts because I do expect him to be okay. My general thought process on that is that Newcastle knew they needed 1 win between now and the end of the season, and looked to Everton at home and thought we're much more likely if we play Isak there that we should get the win versus if we play him away at Arsenal. It's not that likely. He obviously has an ongoing issue, but I do think he'll be available for Everton at home. If between now and the deadline it looks like he's not going to be available, I would just replace him with Ollie Watkins, who doesn't make the majority of these drafts. Look at someone like a Callum Wilson or another forward in likes of Evan Nilsson, in the likes of Wissa, that you could have a look at, or potentially playing just 2 strikers as well. The other thing is Ben White is in all 3 of these drafts. If you do not have the money, dropping him down to Kivior, who looks set to start with the Saliba being a doubt, but also how many minutes he's played, is just an easy way to free up over 1 million, which should allow you to fit it into your budget. So the first draft that we're going to take a look at is the safe draft. So this is for you if you're 10 points ahead of your mini league rival, you're 10 points ahead of overall rank, you don't really worry too much about this week, and you just want to have a team that's not going to do too much damage if you pick it. And it's basically got a lot of the highly owned players in it. And I don't really recommend doing this if you're on a free hit this week, but if it's the situation you're in and all you care about is protecting yourself. Now, if you're protecting yourself from a mini league rival, then picking a team which is basically the same as theirs is probably the best scenario. But in terms of protecting rank, this is a team that would probably look to do something like that. So we've gone with a double up of the Arsenal defense in David Raya and Ben White. Of course, David Raya is chasing the Golden Glove and the most clean sheets. He's currently joined with Sells at the moment at the top with 13. And with Timber out for the season, Ben White looks set to start at right back. He is quite attacking. Now, you could go with a Kivior. As I said, if Saliba is available, you could go with him. But Ben White does feel pretty attacking. The Newcastle defense is about 60% owned and has a really good fixture at home to Everton this week. Livramento is the most highly owned of those. I do like him as a pick. You could also opt for someone like a Dan Burn because Everton are without Branthwaite and Tarkowski, so they might be a little bit weaker in the air. So someone like a Dan Burn could be a nice differential, but in terms of safe play, you go with Livramento. And then Gvardiol. Now, away at Fulham is not a fixture I particularly like. And if you're on free hit, he's probably one of the ones that you're going to look to back against. And we'll talk about other defenders in a moment. But if you're trying to play it safe, he's going to be 80-90% owned this week. So sticking with Gvardiol is probably a sensible thing. A few other defenders, people will look to buy Kirkes this week. People will look to buy Dan Burn. People will look to buy Kepa in goal. They're the ones that we've got on the bench, but they're not that highly owned if you're trying to play it safe. In terms of the midfielders, Salah and Burmo and Jared Bowen feel like they picked themselves. The fourth one would probably be a Bukayo Saka or a Kevin De Bruyne, but it depends a little bit on what your team value is, and I couldn't quite stretch up to them. So what I've done is I've put Kluivert, because a lot of people will be looking at Kluivert, Semenyo, or Evan Nilsson for that Leicester at home game. So if you don't have the money to go up to someone like a De Bruyne or a Bukayo Saka, who are highly owned, you could go with a Kluivert. You could also go with a Jacob Murphy, who is the midfielder on the bench, because again, there's a little bit of residual ownership of him, and of course in the Newcastle attack as well. But Bowen against Ipswich, Salah against Palace, and Brian and Burma away at Wolves, all great options on the final day, and will all be very highly owned as well. And then up front, the sort of template front line of Alexander Isak, Ollie Watkins, and Yohan Wissa. Again, if you're looking to protect rank, just going with all 3 of those. If Isak is not available, we spoke about what you could do with that. You probably would sub him out for Evan Nilsson, or you would go and play Jacob Murphy in your midfield as well, or you downgrade him a lot and go and buy Bukayo Saka into your midfield as well. But at the moment, I plan on Isak likely being available. So this isn't a very exciting free hit draft. It probably looks quite similar to a lot of your teams who are not playing the free hit this week. So I don't really advise this is a free hit draft that you should really pick, But if you are really trying to protect rank and that is all you care about, something like this kind of covers all the high threats to you going into game week 38. Next up is having a look at some differentials. So if you are chasing a 30-point gap or something and you have your free hit left and you need to go completely against the curve, then this is a kind of draft that you could go to have a look at. We've gone with Kepa in goal just to have a little bit of the Bournemouth defense / goalkeeper. Leicester at home is a pretty good fixture. It'll be one of the highest predicted clean sheets of the week. We've gone with Ben White. So although the Arsenal defense will be highly owned, Ben White won't be. I don't expect that many people to be able to bring him in this week. And the attacking threat he shows up that right-hand side is pretty good. And then we've doubled up on Newcastle. As I said in the earlier save section, Everton are going to be without Tarkowski and likely Branthwaite as well, which means they should be pretty fragile from set pieces and from aerial threats. So we've gone with both Dan Burn and Fabian Schär. So not only do I think there is a good clean sheet possibility with them, I also think the goal threat is pretty good as well. Chance of one of those two coming away with a 15-pointer does feel pretty good. The other defenders that we've had a look at would be Cucurella going away to Nottingham Forest. We know his potential of picking up a 15-pointer. And then, of course, Trent. If we were to know going into the final home game of the season that Trent Alexander-Arnold was going to start at home to Crystal Palace in game week 38 in his final game for Liverpool, he could be the differential of all differentials because no one is going to be able to afford it. No one is going to be prioritizing buying Trent this week. So if you're on a free hit, and you want a differential, if we got news before the deadline that Trent was going to start or Arne Slot told us, he could be definitely one to go with. Into midfield, we're kind of covering similar teams, but instead of Salah, we've gone with Luis Diaz. Offers a nice bit of a differential. I expect Liverpool to go full strength in that final home game. The game, of course, they get the Premier League trophy. We've gone with Anthony Gordon over Alexander Isak. I was actually really impressed with Gordon in the fixture against Arsenal in game week 37. I expect him to start at home to Everton as well. We've gone with Kluivert again. He was in the last draft, but I still think he'll be differential enough. And actually, we've put the captaincy armband on him as a nice differential. And then we're going with Martinelli. It could be Trossard. It could be someone like an Odegaard, but I think Martinelli is probably the safest for minutes whilst also combining good attacking threat away at Southampton. He's a nice cheap price, and I don't imagine many people will buy him. And then up front, so we've got Haaland, right? I know some of you will look at it and think, Harry, he's not a good pick. And he isn't really for the money that you're spending. But if you're on a free hit and you're going differential, that you're not buying Saka, you're not going Bowen, you're not going De Bruyne, you're not going Salah, then having Erling Haaland as a differential, although he's really expensive, if you've got the money, is not the worst idea. Evan Nilsson again to triple up on Bournemouth and then Kai Havertz to triple up on Arsenal. We are expecting him to start probably back in the Arsenal squad and did feature off the bench in game week 37 as well. On the bench, we've gone with Kevin Schade. Again, there's going to be decent ownership of the Brentford guys in Mbeumo and in Wissa as well. So if you wanted someone a little bit different, you've got Kevin Schade in a midfield spot. I don't think I would free hit this whole team as a differential team, but if you need to pick some differentials, there are quite a lot in here who'll be quite low owned this week that you could have a look at. And finally is the draft that I would probably recommend having a look at. So we've gone with a double up of Arsenal and then we've gone with Dan Burn. I've gone with Burn over Livramento just for the attacking threat from set pieces and Everton maybe being a bit fragile. And then we've gone with Kirkes, very attacking option at Bournemouth at home to Leicester, feels like a really nice fixture. In the midfield, there's some template options. There's some slight differentials in there. Salah is in. You've got Brian Mbeumo. You've got Jared Bowen and maybe Saka. Saka is not going to be that highly owned. He might get closer to the deadline if we start to get confirmation that he's going to start. But I think there is a little bit of doubt creeping into people. So I would go with him. And the final one is Kluivert. We've tripled up on Bournemouth with Evan Nilsson in the forward line. And we've gone with Alexander Isak. If Alexander Isak is not going to be available, you should be able to sub him out and go with someone like an Ollie Watkins. You could also go with Wissa. You could go with Callum Wilson or Asula if they're the ones that are going to start as well. If I was on a free hit this week, I would go something like this. Maybe it's not quite differential enough if you're chasing. Maybe you want to go a little bit safer with Watkins over Evan Nilsson if you're trying to belay it a bit safer or something like that. So I suppose this is something I would have a look at, going with something that looks like this. If you want it a bit safer, maybe add a few more of the Gvardiols, of the Ollie Watkins of the game week into this draft. If you want to go a little bit more differential, maybe you take out a Saka, maybe you go against Isak, maybe you go against Jared Bowen or Brian Mbeumo and add a few more differentials in there. So it's really difficult to offer a one solution for all free hit draft this week because it will depend on what you need to achieve in game week 38. But if I was going to offer a one draft fits all approach, it would look something a little bit like this. So that's it. We're not going to dwell too much on this video. I know some of you have been asking for it. So here is that video and here is the drafts for you. Flick between the different drafts depending on what you are trying to achieve this season and have a little bit of fun with it. Have a pick on your free hit or your wildcard if you're playing it this week that you just want, that you just have a gut feeling of that maybe no one else is going to go with. Have at least one pick in your draft that you feel that way about. That is what I recommend because that is part of the joy of Game Week 38 and of a free hit and a wildcard as well. We're going to wrap it up there. Videos have been quite long recently, so we'll wrap it up in hopefully under 15 minutes. Thank you all for watching. 2,000 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here. Any questions you have about Game Week 38, drop them all in the comment section down below. Transfer targets will be out on Thursday morning. Team selection out on Friday morning. Probably complete guide will be Saturday morning because, of course, it is a Sunday afternoon deadline. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I'll be back again very soon.